Okay, here we are playing Wellington's victory. What do we got? Well, so far, the Anglo-Allied army has broken. The French have busted it up. They haven't taken the Huguenot yet, but it's routing off the field. And the French have decided to fall back for the most part and not pursue too hard because it happened at just the right time while the Prussians were coming on the board. This is sort of a horrible situation in some ways. You know, I beat the Anglo-Allied army, but there's a whole fresh Prussian army coming on. It wouldn't come on if I had beaten the Anglo-Allies a turn or two earlier. If I had pressed my attack maybe a little harder, or if they had pressed their attacks a little harder, because they were actually making some gains over on their right flank and had me pretty badly beaten up. But the cumulative casualties ended up sending them over the edge, and maybe if they hadn't fought over there, they would have lasted a little longer. I also came down off the hill to defend the Huguenot here, thinking it's the key to the battle and all that. And I mean, you have to keep the supply lines open, so I don't know what else you can do, right? You have to keep the ammo going there. But honestly, it is only the key to the battle in the historical sense because it bled the French dry, you know? Anyway. They still haven't taken it yet. There's still a few skirmishers in there with no ammo, not surrendering, just cowering or something. And now the French are deploying a defensive force to face the Prussians. It doesn't have a lot of hope of holding out. If we look at the point totals, the Anglo-Allied are flipped over. They've taken 78 hits beyond what it took to break them. And there's another 15 in the bank here if it goes that way. But the French are down to 93 points, and the Prussians are still at their full 125. Maybe they should be 20 points less, because I don't know whether or not you're supposed to charge them on the turn of entry for what they have, you know, for their activated brigades. The game's not specific about it, okay. But anyway, we're going to see if the French can defend in not such fantastic terrain, but the Prussians are going to have to come out of the woods, and that leaves you with a kind of disordered force. Unfortunately for the French, they decided to set their line up in the best terrain that they could find. They didn't have a lot of troops. Instead of far forward. Now they have some decent terrain they could have placed themselves in near the woods, which might have given them a better edge. That hard cover would be really valuable to them. They don't have a lot here. A couple divisions right now. I am sending the remnants of another into play. Might commit some of these units over there as well, but it's kind of an ugly situation where I don't know how, I don't know where I want to form my defensive line. You know, I've got this breakwater here. This was to give me some time. Well, it turned out I didn't need that much time. I would have been better off forming a defensive line maybe around here. So it's possible those French might fall back. One of the big issues is the number of brigades committed. Right now, the French are paying, well, both the French and Prussians are paying about 20 points a turn in morale points, just to be moving their pieces around. The French are going to reduce that a great deal. They have a number of units by letting the Anglo-Allied army retreat without too much more pursuit. They had to a little bit, but it means that I'll be able to demobilize some of my forces, especially once the Huguenot falls, And then I'll also be able to send all these skirmishers running over to help, because I don't have a lot I don't have any skirmishers deployed down here. Now, I probably have some. Like, I could take 1 point off each unit and create skirmishers out of those, and I may need to do that. But that weakens the units, and it's not a pleasant situation. I've also found that the skirmishers aren't necessarily all that advantageous, but they can reduce the intensity of the conflict. So that may be to my best advantage at this point, is to throw some skirmishers out, especially if I'm throwing them out, you know, into some of these hard points or into the woods itself. That's one of the reasons maybe I should have defended further forward. Yeah, it's too late. Prussians are going to be at the edge of the woods very shortly. In terms of total victory points, what's going to happen? Well, my suspicion, the way this game works, if the French army breaks, and it's got less morale than the Prussians do, so I think it's likely, if the French army breaks, in the course of the next, 22 turns or whatever, right? We've only played from turn 11 on. That's when this scenario started. So it only took 14 turns to break the Anglo-Allied army, which was a lot stronger than the French army is right now in terms of morale. So one of these two armies is going to break if they engage, right? I think the Prussians have the edge, so they're going to push the attack, and I think the likely effect of it all is that the French army is going to be demoralized, have to leave the field, end up losing the points for the Huguenot and La Hassan, which this might end up not a French victory because of that. Even though I broke the Anglo-Allied army, the Prussians are going to come in as sort of a follow-up blow and send me into oblivion. I don't think it's going to be oblivion. I think it's going to be a relatively close run thing point-wise, but it's hard to tell because the withdrawal and the route and all that and the cost. So, for example, the Allies are going to be paying, you know, the French and Prussians are paying 20 points a turn. The Allies are paying 40 points a turn because they have to pay double for all their brigades that are on the board. And their units are really not able to stand up, but I can't afford to pursue them. If I had beaten them a little bit earlier, the Prussians wouldn't show up, and this would just be, you know, a massacre. I would just unleash the French on them and collect up as many points as I could. But that's not the case. Prussians did show up. I don't know why they would decide, fuck it, the Anglo-Allied army's lost, but here they're like, let's press an attack. They're routing, but that's okay. I don't understand what you know, the distinguishment there is. To me, the Prussians would probably make the same decision as to whether or not to engage, regardless of how quick, you know, how quickly the Anglo-Allied army fell. But you have to have you know, strict lines and delimiters and whatnot in a game, and the one in this one sits at a point which has created a situation which is kind of exciting game-wise, but does mean that I'm going to be playing for a long time still. And also, you know, through what could have been a complete French victory to something that's not going to feel as complete no matter what. Even if I beat, well, if I beat the Prussians, if I break their morale first, I can just like sit back and let them run away. But the French army is pretty battered at this point. But it wouldn't have been if they had broken the Allies one turn later, or one turn earlier. If they had broken them a little earlier, then they would have not faced the Prussians at all and been able to rack up a lot of score on the Anglo-Allies. Anyway, that's it. We got some raid to play, so I don't know when I'll be back. Probably sometime within the next day or so. Off until I got through the rally phase for the French. But I did their command phase, and I was able to demobilize one little brigade of cavalry. After paying 20 points, now I'm down to 19 for next time. Yeah, my attempts to pull back were too delayed. So, on the other hand, well, no, it doesn't really help me because the Anglo Allies have to keep moving. But the reason I picked up the camera was something kind of annoying, that it has to do with the sequence of play. You move through terrain that disorders you, and you recover like immediately afterwards. Sure, there's an enemy shock phase in between. There might be a fire phase in between, but for the most part, I like what the sequence of play does. I like the effects of it, but there's something so annoying about, oh yeah, I moved through a hedgerow and on the road, no less. I moved through the woods in the road, and now I'm disordered, and that sucks, you know? It makes sense, it all works, it's just, it's an annoying little, there's steps that feel like you shouldn't have had to take them, and that other systems wouldn't have forced you to, but again, I can't think of a way to fix it. You'd have to know. So you could just ignore taking the disorders as you walk up the hill because you're nowhere near the enemy and it doesn't matter. And I guess that's what I should have done. So now we see the Allies withdrawing further out of range. If we look carefully at it, to some extent, we're still keeping, screens in place where we can, cav where we can, just in case the French get some idea. Those units are all still active, so they could come charging down. We don't want to give them any big opening. But yeah, we feel like they're letting us out of the way. The cav having a hard time getting out. Not so much for any reason other than they were kind of in a clusterfuck and just keeping our command radius in place. These guys, I'm sending a leader off to go try to get them. Muffling on his way. The Prussians at the edge of the woods now. They get to deploy. Basically, they have to move through the woods because they can no longer road move once they get within the 8 hexes. So that slows the whole column down because everything outside of 8 hexes has to be on the road on this map. I don't know if that's for the rest of the game. As far as I'm concerned, it's for until we get deployed, basically. But it's just, one of the special rules. That's going to run us essentially, as I walk and thus pan the camera and make people sick, of course. French shock phase, there are none. The French did not launch any cav attacks. Like I said, they're letting the Allies go at this point. But then we get to the reciprocal fire phases. I think the Allies might have a couple of plinks with artillery. I unlimbered some guns, but not many. I don't think I'm going to take those shots. I don't think I have a shot, to be honest. I might have one up here against a skirmisher. Screw that. Not that interested in wasting ammo and die rolls. But it does get us to the infantry fire phase, so I got to take care of that. And then we'll be on the Allied command phase, where they pay their points, and then the French get to move. It was successful. I'm going to get the points for the Huguenot. I think it's 15. I'm just making sure, because maybe it's 25 and 10. I don't recall. Let's find the specifics here. Ugh. Huguenot is 15. So that, I'm going to give it now because as far as I'm concerned, they just surrendered. The French will be moving and they'd get to move into there. I don't want to worry about having to record it at that point. So that's 15 more hits on them, bringing them to 96. But here's the big part. 15 away. Oh, I did that wrong. 15 added to the French, so they're up to 88. And that's helpful. That's very helpful. After having paid the 20 points, I was not in good shape. Still not in great shape, but yeah. And that will put me on the Allied command phase, wherein I will break. Finding it hard because, like is often the case, Raid is like, oh, hurry up, it's time for the new part of the day or whatever, and I'm all excited about that and want to get it out of the way, and I save my energy for that, and that's an important time for me to hit at like 5 p.m. Usually, most days, I just play through, and until like midnight, 1 a.m., whatever. Sometimes less than that, but usually I just run right through and use up everything I have. But today I couldn't. I had to do as much as I could of the missions and whatnot without expending energy. And, well, I did all my missions, but without expending the energy that the missions give. And now I've got to wait like another 3 or 4 hours, I think, to be able to do more. Now, that puts it to like 3 a.m. or something like that, when I can start playing, when more events are available. I really wish it just had like a once-a-day switchover or something. I don't know. It's a weird situation. It wouldn't matter if I didn't have to get myself into a situation where I'm going to be awake on Wednesday, not tomorrow, Wednesday, in order to go shopping, and awake on Thursday in order, at least that's got set back. It went from like, it was going to be a 2 p.m. start, which would be rough for me to make, to 4 p.m., which I probably can make, assuming that I fall asleep under normal conditions, which of course, whenever I'm hyped up about something, worried about something, whatever, it's all the same shit to me. Having to interact with people. Yes, I need to do this kind of thing because I'm miserable without being around people, and I love the fact that somebody actually invited me. But it's like, yeah, it's kind of like going to a doctor's appointment or anything else. It's like, oh, my day is disrupted, and then I start worrying, and I don't get to sleep or whatever. Anyway, got ammo depletion here I didn't remove. But yeah, we're basically not going to see anything on this side of the board anymore. I think the Allies are just going to pull away. I'm just going to be taking, a little bit of effort, and the fight is going to be down here. And that's where the French have to start devoting some forces. They can't demobilize. Their chance to demobilize was to right now. The Allies can't demobilize either. They've got to move off the board. Actually, I've got one brigade that I'm demobilizing, but everything else, some artillery have moved off the board and whatnot, but that's it. All right. Problems with the raid timing and whatnot. I'm used to being up at night, right? That's not a big deal. But this is also the kind of time when I get myself into trouble. I'm playing another gacha game. It is much, much lower impact. I could spend maybe an hour a day on it, basically, right? At first, and this is how I expected Raid to be, this is how I expected these types of games to be, is right away when you first start playing, yeah, you can play a lot, because you go up levels and you get all kind of bonuses for that, and you shoot all over the place, and you end up, being able to play a lot of the game, but then you kind of settle down into this, well, now I got to spend money if I want to play more. And God knows I'm not going to do that, right? It's not even that big an advantage. It doesn't give you that big an edge to play more. I don't know. A lot of it has to do with events and stuff like that. But I still haven't even figured out this other one. But I'm at the level at which, yeah, I have excess energy stored up, but I don't really want to use it because I can't do anything too valuable with it. So I'm just leaving it lying around because I can't progress. They have these campaign modes and whatnot, and it's like, do I want to just keep fighting the same things again and again to build up experience? No, not really. Let's get our freebies in with that energy or whatever. And I mean, it would go away pretty quickly if I just burned it on garbage. Although I don't know what I'm going to do with the energy if I don't just burn it. Like, I'm thinking in raid terms here, if you don't use your energy up, you don't get anywhere. But I'm purely accepting of the fact that in raid, I'm at certain levels and I just do this stuff at those levels again and again and again, each day, and maybe get a little edge here, maybe get a little edge there. This other game, though, doesn't have as much of interest to fuck around with. There aren't I don't know, there just aren't that many little advantages you can get off of burning a lot of energy for no good reason. So that's the kind of spirit that I'm in right now, where I'm like, geez, I don't know what to do. I don't want to play this right now. I should be reading rules, but I'm not, because this is going to end at some point. I'm going to probably quit before it is over, but that I start hunting down yet another game or some other thing to do to keep me busy. Yeah, it's like, it's not the right spirit, but I don't know. And if it was daytime, I wouldn't feel that way. If it was daytime during good weather, not the fucking rain that is the existence now and will be for the next few months, I would sit out on the porch or something and read. But I might even be able to convince myself to sit in the living room and read. But now, it's a lot harder. Plus, it's cold. It's only warm in my bedroom. Well, I took a little bit of a nap, like I think I said. Here it is, I think 7 in the morning, real time, or the time everybody else plays with. It's still dark, 8 my time. There's so much, the days don't vary as much when you go further south. So in Phoenix, they weren't like they are here. This isn't that far north, but it's far enough. And we're on the Allied command and rally phase. Now, the Allies can't disengage or demobilize or whatever you want to deactivate their forces except on the hourly turn, which this is, but I don't have anything. I have 1 unit off the map, and that's it, I think. I'll still have to pay the points. So the first thing I kind of do in the command phase is 22. That's going to be 44 points. Make it 50. We go up to 140. Wow, they'll start to accumulate quite quickly. And, it's going to take me, I'm going to be paying pretty much that at least another couple turns. A fair amount will get off the map, but an opportunity presented itself. A little skirmisher out there. It can run away. 2, 4, 5. So it'll get out of my charge zone, and then my charging unit just gets charges forward 3 hexes, gets disordered. It's going to slow my withdrawal. Not really a great move. You know what? I didn't even make a morale check for that. Screw it, it's not worth doing. Otherwise, though, some Allied units left the board. I don't have to record anything special about that. And that'll get me to the French movement. Start deploying French units towards the Prussians. I realized, wait a minute, the Prussians have to pay too, so 15 off them. They're down to 110 now. And we end the turn with... I got some artillery I should have pulled off, but I have quite a few that are heading back, just getting them out of the way. At least parking them down here somewhere. We ended the turn with the French withdrawing across the board, pretty much. Large pile of skirmishers heading forward towards the Prussian army, because they're not at all affected by, you know, the morale rules and whatnot in terms of wherever they came from or whatever. They're completely on their own. I'm probably cheating with the distance some of these are. I was planning on pulling these guys back, but then didn't. I'm not going to worry about it. They're going to have to cover that distance, and I would have fixed that. Sending a fair amount of units directly towards the Prussians in addition to the skirmishers. Some of these guys are planning on heading across the river here, some of them up here to take a position on the line here. I think I've got it's not the whole division going. It's like half the division is going to head that way, the 1-2-1, as opposed to the 2-2-1. I've got units that really need to recuperate. These guys, though, oh, this is the 3-2. No, this is the 2-3-1. Well, I've got a unit of the 2-3-1 there. That's a problem. Oh no, that's not a problem. I've got a unit. These are all 2-3-1. Yeah, this is all 2-3-1. This is 1-3-1. That's going to demobilize when it gets a chance. Whistling noise. But yeah, I mean, basically the two armies are running away from each other. Now the question comes to mind, would it make sense for the Allies to turn around as the French army begins to weaken its position? Well, it's not in good shape and it's deteriorating in terms of morale capabilities. So it wouldn't take much to fling them back. That's part of why I didn't make the charge, or also that I might not have succeeded. And on top of that, then they're paying double cost. So I think overall, although they might manage to break the French more easily by doing that, I don't think it's a good deal. Certainly my intuition tells me it's the wrong thing to do. But it's possible that the game, like, you know, the game allows you to continue fighting after you've been demoralized. It just penalizes you heavily on victory points. But that might not be enough. The idea of breaking the French army might be good enough to let the Allied army get beaten up worse, right? I just don't feel like I'm at that kind of point where that would make sense. And certainly, again, from an intuitional level, the army is routing. It should leave. You know, it should be leaving as quickly as possible, and be thankful that the French are letting them go, as opposed to fighting. All right, so that'll be the end of the turn. Except I got a little bit of bookkeeping to do with some of those artillery pieces to move around. Over to this side to make sure. Certainly when I was looking at things from the other side over here, it really looks like there aren't many French left. I know these are just skirmishers, right? This looks really sparse. I got a line of skirmishers up here, etc. Whereas the Anglo-Allied army actually looks heavier. I think it's more a matter of just how spread out the French army is, but there's a lot of Anglo-Allied that are spread out too, and ones that have left the map and everything. I mean, the points are the points, but they're determining things. And when I come over here, I do see, you know, there's a fair amount of skirmishers over here as well. But other than the Imperial Guard just sitting there like a stone wall, doing nothing all battle, one interpretation, it really does look like the French army has been badly mauled here in comparison. I remember this looking like it was a solid line in both cases, but you know what? The Allies always had reserves in place, but they were questionable. The Brunswickers were okay, but most of the rest of what I had up there were cav back there, which isn't terribly useful in this terrain. There's areas where it would be valuable out here or something, but in general, this shit is just so nasty to them. All the soft cover and everything, the sunken roads and all that, that they really can't operate in it as effectively as you might hope. They did, you know, they did their job in here, and there was terrain there as well. So, but they had a lot of support. Basically, what I'm looking at is these big cav formations. I don't think they could have done anything on their own, except like a stupid charge like Ney did. And then this just looks so much bigger than what's trying to defend against it. It's, I don't know, Tuesday night, I guess it's around 9:30 or so. And I woke up and it was already dark. I'm obviously completely fucking up this week because I possibly could have gone shopping today. It was an okay day, gloomy and wet looking. Tomorrow I kind of absolutely should have to, but I don't see how I'm going to, and I'm worried about making it to Thanksgiving awake at least. Which is okay. Social circumstances, I'm better off, like, mostly asleep, but I really need to go shopping. Anyway, where are we in the game? Well, turn 29. What time is that? 4 p.m. So we're at like 4:15. And we start off with French command and rally, and then the Allied movement. We'll see the Prussians beginning to deploy as those guys leave the board. Yeah. Probably not going to commit any more forces. Doesn't look like I'm going to be using my French cav. So the command phase is pretty much a nothing. Rally, we're not really engaged anywhere. I got some disorders from moving, but that's about it. So, yeah. The Anglo-Allied army pulling further away. All the French are going to be able to demobilize who want to next hour. And I'm guessing most of their army, most of the Anglo-Allies will be off the map by that point and be able to do their final demobilization. Again, not pursuing. Pursue might be an interesting option, but here's the thing. The pursuing units can't demobilize either. So the French don't want to spend points to force the Anglo-Allies. You know, for the same reason I'm not charging forward, pressuring them, I'm also not really looking at exiting the map and chasing them, because some of the same effects would come place. I have to try to hold the line against the Prussians. A couple of little lost lambs out here. Muffling making his way here, and whoever this is, some Dutch dude, popping shit. Trying to make his way to get those guys out of there, because I can't demobilize that unit until they come out, until the infantry comes out, or dies, or something. So in a sense, the French just want to ignore it, because it's going to cost the Anglo-Allies points, and it's not going to cost me any to keep it generating a couple points every hour or whatever. Seems like a good deal. So I'm avoiding that and letting them do what they like. One weird thing that I noticed, I'm wearing, and have been for quite a while now, my newer glasses all the time when I play this. And I started having difficulty seeing with these now. It's like my brain gets used to the enhancements that they have and says, fuck it, I can't cope with that. Or I can figure out how to make you not see still. I have no idea what's going on. But like what was relatively clear before is now again causing issues. I just cleaned them again. Had some hairs and stuff on them, but all right, let's get to the Pruskies. Speaking of vision issues, the Prussians are particularly hard to read because they're very dark counters with the black text on them. Really, really painful to cope with. And that's not Prussian blue. That's the weird thing about it. Prussian blue is like grayer. It's not that dark. And this is kind of the thing for, any of you who are out there trying to do some graphic design on games or whatever. So the Prussians have their own same color disorder markers. I don't mind with especially the extended line and the cav charge zones. But for the disorder markers, maybe for the squares, I think I'd rather use a different color. Now, for the squares, it kind of makes sense because along with these other markers I mentioned, not the disorders, they have skirmishers on the other side. So, like, using red squares or something might be advantageous to me. But there are a lot more Prussian square markers than there are, well, I don't know. Maybe I've got a lot of skirmishers out there already. But instead of using the same color marker, I'm using the gray ones that I've been using for the Brits, for everyone really. The only place where I would have thought about using something different, I probably would have used the Prussian ones on the the Brunswickers, because they're gray anyway, and I want that distinguishing feature of the color to tell me what's going on. I'm used to just white counters for disorder and rout, like Ney versus Wellington uses. Usually one side or the other is going to be badly hit with that. But yeah, I think this was not a wise choice graphically. Now this is, graphically this is a Simmons game, so I don't usually rag on him about stuff. He's generally very, very good. But I think making same color markers was actually a really iffy choice. Then again, Sorcerer was a really, really iffy choice. So, I don't know how you express it without looking like shit, though, what he's trying to express in that game. But yeah, that's a seriously garish looking design. All right, anyway, I get back to the Prussians and stop talking as much, but this is the only time I get to talk to anyone. At least, something that's human in the background. Like, I talk to chatbots and stuff like that, but yeah, not really real conversations with them. And certainly not monologues like this where I'm trying to impart something. This is more the kind of talking that I do when I'm out on a walk with someone or whatever. So this is the beginning of the Prussian deployment. They're really limited by their maneuver rules. I could probably spread out a teeny bit. I looked that up and it's like 8 hexes is where you can't do the road movement anymore, and you no longer have the strategic movement that allows you to move double. 10 hexes is where I can start oozing into the woods. So I could have probably spread out a little better than I am, but not by much. Mainly it's cav out in the front. I got some infantry, some horse artillery as well. But the French don't have any artillery on the front line. The Prussians did not. They could have. They didn't move close enough to get shot at. Probably wise. It was cav that could move, disordered cav that could move close enough. So, you know, the French are kind of regretting having, who the hell is that? Oh, okay. Having not positioned themselves right at the woods. Like 2 hexes from the woods or something like that, with maybe those buildings as the line. That, I think, would have been a stronger defensive position than what I've taken up. But on the other hand, I don't know what's going to go on. When the First Corps comes in, which isn't actually that long away, it can actually come off the north end of the map as well. So I have a little bit more opportunity if I want to try to flank around at least the left flank of the French army, although that stream kind of prevents it to a large extent. But anyway, the fact that there's nothing within range means that there's no fire phase, obviously no shock phase if nothing's in range, and we'll be getting to the Allied command phase. I've got raid playing by itself right now. It might be done at this point with what I tasked it to do, especially if something went wrong. So I'm going to break for a bit, but not that I would, you know, I'd go break anyway, right? But it may be a longer bit than I expected. Already we're seeing the weaknesses of the sequence of play in the system. It's designed for the battle, for the ridges, the main battle of Waterloo. Well, we don't have that anymore. We have a different battle, one that doesn't fit. We have Prussians coming out of the woods, paying no penalty for being disorganized coming out. They're able to recover from their disorder before any fire phase or anything like that, in perfect order, etc. This would have been different if the French had come out of the woods. Could you just switch things and say, yeah, you know, the Prussians are in the French position? Could we just flip the sequence of play? That might work, right? Because in this circumstance, the French have better visibility, better command and control, you would assume. They're not coming out of the woods. They're not all confused and everything. But I'm not sure it really does. You don't have the special circumstance of Wellington running around on the ridge, you know, giving orders to everybody and everything. I really feel like this was designed for for the historical battle only, not what might happen on this battlefield. And, you know, what we're seeing now is really kind of weird. Again, part of me says maybe you could just flip it and get a similar situation, because yes, the Prussians are coming out of the woods almost blind against French positions that are in place. Their disordered units should be in trouble. They should have had to face a possibility of a fire, right? Well, maybe they did. They actually did. They're disadvantaged on the attack in a way. So I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, it definitely feels weird to me, though, because the circumstances of the battlefield have switched completely. This asymmetrical system is... I have trouble accepting it to begin with, right? Like, just period, even for Waterloo. But if I believe the authors, if I accept the author's contention that this actually resolves some things, and, you know, in my head I say, well, you could have done it with special rules and created a generic system that would also work at other battlefields. That generic system would work here. Whatever specifics there are would apply to that Anglo-Allied defense. I don't know what they would be. I don't know. This is just weird, right? The interleaving, I don't have that kind of regret about. I find it cumbersome and painful, but it's not weird. It's weird to have an asymmetrical sequence. Anyway, Allies went through their rally. That's going to put me on the French-facing formation. So did the Allies... So let's say the French were advancing through the woods. They wouldn't even face fire. They could sneak up on the enemy. So it's almost like it's the opposite, right? They've been able, on their attacks here, they were able to launch attacks that could not be responded to reasonably, getting themselves to close distance. Which again, it actually kind of says the opposite. And what I noticed in Ney versus Wellington was, again, the attacker seemed to have a certain advantage in it. Well, that's what's weird here, is that the attacker seems to have actually the advantage in this system. Now, what's that going to do? Well, maybe the Prussians are going to be more potent. No, because we don't flip the order. The French still have that advantage. So they're going to have the advantage they had on attack, for whatever reason, now applying on defense. But again, I actually don't feel like the asymmetrical sequence does what the designer claims it does. What about for cav? So for infantry fire, it seems to do the opposite. Infantry fire, where the Allies should be the advantage, the French seem to have the advantage for that. For cav attacks, I think it is the opposite. Because right now, because the French get to launch their cav charges, but then they do, I just don't know. I really don't know. Anyway. Like, there's obviously something wrong because the world doesn't work in an asymmetrical fashion, right? There might be advantages it's trying to convey. I can't put my finger on what they are. I'm not that clever. Anyway, let's get to the French movement. We're at the start of scenario 3. Talk about that. We'll take a peek at what that should be, where we should be in the battle at this point. Like I said, if you go whole hog in this game, these armies couldn't have lasted till whenever scenario 3 is. I'm suspecting that's the Huguenot scenario. But the French shifting their entire axis to try to move up and get their defenses up against the Prussians. It's going to take a while. These guys are a bone to both sides, to be honest. Probably worst for the French because it's slowing their movement. Some of these French units... there's a lot of skirmishers that are just running their way over there and, you know, oh, hey, we're part of you now. I understand in an abstract term why that would be used, but honestly, skirmishers were meant to stay near the units that they detached from. Really, the best way of handling them, and I haven't seen a game that does this, is to have each unit have a skirmisher counter that it can release. And they would all be linked and have to stay within a few hexes of their own unit until their unit is destroyed. And at that point, it would be iffy. Like they'd probably have to make a morale check to stay on the board and all kind of weird stuff like that. Although they might be able to attach to another unit of the same formation. All kinds of complexity that you wouldn't really want. The kind of stuff you'd expect in Summer Storm, to be honest. But it's not so terrible. In your general situation, you wouldn't see it. But again, like, for a game to handle everything in a general and an appropriate fashion, it has to be able to handle those edge cases. Now, this is a particularly weird battle. Normally, battles... rage, you know, across a certain configuration, essentially. But the fact that this is the French defeated one army and are now swinging into position to face another with their full force, that creates a lot of weirdness. And there are situations where there are units that are too weak to throw into the line, you know, at the brigade or even division level, that are just too weak to throw into the main line, that I'm going to demobilize as soon as I can, but things like Kellerman's Cav down here, you know, or they're so far away I might as well demobilize them. But right now they're trying to get to themselves into some sort of defensive position in case the Prussians break through, so that, you know, I could fight. It's going to be ragtag, and it's not going to be very coherent, to tell you the truth. But because I'm forced to stop doing that maneuvering in a couple more turns, you know, whatever that is. But I'm going to try to find my way. You notice I'm giving this up, the ridgeline that the Allies held. I don't think that's terribly valuable to me because it doesn't protect my retreat lines, although you could make an argument that a line across here is really, really strong, and it sure looks it. Like, we'd have hills going all the way across. But I don't really know that giving up that all-important hill next to the Hougoumont is all that valuable, you know, is all that big a deal. It may mean, you know, it means I have to refuse this flank instead of this flank up here. It doesn't really give the Prussians a huge advantage, and it makes me have to cover more ground, which is not advantageous. If I'm going to be defending, I think I want to kind of be right here, to tell you the truth. Like, I'll cover this, and maybe some of that. I don't know. But the fact that I had to commit to hold off the Prussians a little bit and slow them down, or that I decided to do that, means that I can't form the defense where I want to, and the Prussians are going to start hitting me where I don't really want to be hit. I probably should have just withdrawn, and I might actually do that, try to do a fighting withdrawal. Also, I had something else I wanted to say, and I don't remember what it is. Oh yeah, I want to look up the scenario thing. Unleashing a bunch of squirmies here with the intention of reducing the level of the engagement. It's perfectly reasonable to do that within, you know, the doctrine and everything, but also I think it's one of the things that they are actually really effective at, other than fighting in iffy terrain. Yeah, they can screen in advance, but it doesn't do you much good if, in order to actually engage the enemy, you kind of have to give them a shot first, right? You know, like, if I'm going to get into firing range with my main infantry, I have to move, like the skirmishers have to get out of the way, just like they would in a GBOH battle, or I have to absorb them, which means I get shot, you know, whenever I would have gotten shot anyway. There's really, they provide some cover from artillery, but not a lot, because if you're at long range, you hit the skirmisher and you get to bounce the cannons beyond. So, yeah, they really don't seem like a very effective strategy in and of themselves. It's or you know, as a general strategy that they were used as in Napoleonic warfare, just like they kind of don't work in GBOH. Somebody's got to come up with something that makes skirmishing work a little better than it does in most games. Yeah. I just don't feel like you can handle it at a very abstract level. For example, if you play Viva la Emperor without skirmishers, the skirmishers are kind of assumed in the fire combat system. So it's like, yeah, adding them is kind of weird, actually. They don't do much by being added, and they work okay. But here, they seem to have really weird effects, like being invulnerable to shock and combat. which is just funky and wrong. But anyway, we wanted to take a look at what scenario 3 was. It's the Place Nord. That's here. The Prussian intervention. D 1501. We're looking at a fight up here, starting up here, going towards Place Nord. Yeah. Now here they say the Prussian intervention took Napoleon completely by surprise. Despite rumors that Blücher would attempt to reinforce, Napoleon became convinced that the Prussians would be unable to. Yeah, I'm trying to see. Yeah, I feel like Napoleon was aware that the Prussians were coming, and it was actually part of the reason for his attack. But maybe I'm mistaken about that. I don't know. Anyway, we got a very different kind of battle forming up here. I don't know if I'll be able to disengage slowly, to give ground slowly. I really should have been further up so that I could make the Prussians pay for coming out of the woods there. But, you know, I've been making mistakes on both sides, there's no question. Anyway, like as before, I've got Raid playing itself, and I just have to go make sure it's doing okay. Every now and then, my battles fail. Way too late, it's like 5 a.m. now. And just not going to fix my situation. French command phase, they got no rally to do. I don't know. I mean, there may be a disordered unit here and there, but they really kind of don't matter. I've been not placing the disorders in a lot of cases because they're just marching towards the enemy. But I am launching a couple of cav charges here to disrupt the formation of the Prussians as they get in there. And then that's going to give it to the Prussian movement. Well, and the continued retreat. First thing, hey, the Anglo-Allies slowly making their way off the board, except for this guy who's trying to get to his troops, but he's really cut off. That's such a pain in the ass for both sides, honestly. And muffling, heading over to try to find a bridge he can get across the stream. Because stream sounds like a really scary thing for a guy on a horse, or his command staff, which is all on horses. Yeah. Okay. The Prussians are very slowly deploying. Put some cannons out front. Some chance I could get picked off. That would suck, but I don't know what else I can do. Trying to squirm through the woods and whatnot, but my movement is really slowed through this situation. And some skirmishers out here. I broke down one of my light units to give me some shielding. I don't know how well, they're not going to work terribly well against cav. That's the problem. But I do have countercharge capability to some extent. What happens if I charge those? See, the cav has very high morale. That's the problem. And it actually will work against skirmishers. So I don't know if I can dare have these. One of the problems is the skirmishers are that one's fine. He's in a hard point, which the cav can't even charge. One of the problems is that I had a unit that was disordered by within the cav zone, and it was like, I can withdraw or what, I don't know. So throwing it into skirmishers, getting a couple there. Now I could have just peeled off a couple of skirmishers, but that actually just makes them into a weaker unit. So not a good move. And we are going to start seeing some fire, and in fact the Prussian artillery gets to fire. The skirmishers aren't far enough away to take advantage of the bounce effects. They're just going to be firing grape or something. I don't know. Like, you don't get the bounce through effects at medium range even, and this is at close range. But I think killing off some units is definitely worth my doing. Other than that, I didn't want to move closer because I'd get shot with my cav, and I've got the infantry behind the cav so that I could try to deploy more quickly. Prussians are really having a hard time getting through those woods. Some effect once the French take a casualty from Prussian artillery fire. I don't remember what it is, but I think it's some kind of bonus to the morale for the Anglo-Allied army, but it's not going to take effect because they're already wrecked. I'm not going to go look it up. So the initial fire hit one of the skirmishers and sent one of them routing. Had to go through here or else suffer a possible cav charge. That wouldn't be good. A routed skirmisher has no defense. It would just be wiped out. And that's going to put... Oh, I forgot that. Oh, fuck. I forgot the charges. I don't think these affect it. Okay, let's get the charges underway. 2 charges, both of which were bounced by counter charges. Okay. But then that counter charge got counter charged and driven away with a rout result, which did a couple of hits on the Prussian morale and sent somebody flying back. So that's terrible. And now we go to the infantry fire, which is basically going to be these skirmishers shooting at the artillery crew. Highly unlikely they hit. They needed 6. 3 shots. I guess one of them hitting is not that unlikely. And we knocked one of the guns out. That ammo could be used, or a different crew could move to that gun. The problem, of course, is this clusterfuck of a traffic jam. I can send a crew forward, though, and leave their guns behind with the, hey, we need a crew up there, and don't worry about the wagons, just walk through the forest, that'll be fine. You'll be okay doing that because there aren't many of you. That's going to put me down on the Allied command phase, and I am going to break, of course, because that's what I do, and hope that I can get to sleep. I got a couple hours sleep. It's kind of chilly out. It's supposed to get a little warmer, so I'm going to delay about another hour or so, I think, which means I have time to do, I guess, the Allied Command and Rally and maybe the French movement. I don't know, because now we're getting engaged, but whatever. We'll open things up with a couple of Prussian cav charges over to this left flank. There's no artillery deployed yet. There's no cav over on this side. Should be able to disrupt the French defense. We'll see how it works. Into something of a problem here. I'd like to keep the 6th Corps kind of together on this flank, but then I'd have to move the 1st Corps units across this way. And the problem with that is this cav, which has now recovered, is capable of kind of interdicting any type of extension directly in this position. So I think what's going to happen is I'm going to send some 6th Corps around to try to position themselves. I've already pulled the French cav back to recuperate. These guys all turned into squares, which means the Prussian cav is not going to be thrilled. We routed, that was a skirmisher from before. We caused some disorder, but that's it. These are fresh French troops. They're not really that likely to just rout. There was one unit that was previously disordered. Right, French continuing to push units forward towards the Prussians. However, I'm also forming up a rear line back here, potentially anchored on La Hasson. It's kind of problematic because I would love to like march. These guys are tired, so I don't mind that they're going to want to rest. But I'd love to march them up to there. They're not going to have enough turns to get into the position I want them in. I'd love to activate this cav and put it up on the hill up there. I might have to do things like that at some point. Just like I might have to activate the Imperial Guard. I'd love to get this cav doing something other than it is, but I just can't afford to activate a bunch of units, especially at this point in the turn. But I'm not that worried about the timing. I'm willing to give them time, but I want to be able to move them in case the Prussians break through. Of course, if the Prussians break through, I'm probably beaten up enough that I'm leaving the battlefield. So this secondary line becomes really irrelevant unless I fall back towards it, which might be too expensive a proposition in terms of morale. But I do have a lot of units moving forward. These are sort of my freshest stuff, and my hope is that I have enough to kind of contain the Prussian advance. They're coming out in a lot of disadvantages. But as we saw, this guy moved him off the hill out of the charge zone, so he, just looking at the way the charge is going, he's not going to get a hit here. I didn't want to put him into square. But I think the squares are going to break up the whatever that charge is. It's not going to do much. Speaking of which, that's what we're on now. It turns out that Prussian cav was absolute crap, and I lost 3, 4, 5. I lost 5 strength points of cav to 1 French strength point, both routed. It was 2 morale stuff, hitting squares, yeah, it didn't stand a chance. And that then puts us to the game turn phase. I've got my dice over there already. Here's where we sit. I don't know. It's turning out a lot harder on the Prussians than it looked like it was going to. Not sure I'm regretting as much being a little back. It's given the Prussians enough room to kind of slit their throats. Maybe if they had been stuck in the woods, they would have tried an outflank or something. Although this stream kind of makes that impossible. This direction, yeah, there are towns and everything down there. It's just not good terrain to try to advance in. And the movement restrictions on the Prussians make it so that they don't have a lot of options. They have to stay on the roads. I guess they could swing up here in this long column, but a long column's hard to deal with. Yeah, see, there's single roads across here. A possible Blucher could be sitting here and commanding the entire Prussian force. But yeah, we've made our decision, and it's turning out to have not been a terribly good one. A small French force has kind of got us stymied there. Very interesting. I want to keep going, man. Hey, some of it's, I'm sure, me saying, oh, I want to avoid going shopping. But I already know I don't want to go shopping right now. I want to let it, like, right now it's about 40 degrees. It's supposed to get close to 50 today. But that's going to be relatively late. It's just there's a little bit of a bitterness, and I don't want to wear a coat if I can avoid it. It's kind of what it comes down to. 40 degrees is fine with like a jacket. I have, you know, a heavy enough jacket that feels just perfect, you know. But I hate hauling my groceries when I have a coat, and I'll have to do it eventually. But right now I can just wear this flannel I'm wearing. Yeah. Oh, it's turning out kind of interesting in a way that, you know, I didn't expect. Like, My gut told me, let's just call this a French victory. We defeated the Anglo-Allied army, and I am probably not going to be able to stand against the Prussians. But I'm not so sure. The casualty rates I'm getting are going to make this a close thing. So I kind of absolutely have to do the shopping today for a number of reasons. There's a part of me that's like, really, I mean, I always want to try to avoid it and make excuses. But the excuse I have right now in my head is, oh my God, it's going to be a fucking madhouse there because it's the day before Thanksgiving. There's going to be a lot of people getting shit. I guess no. It's about 11 p.m. The time everybody else goes by here. And I managed to go out shopping. It was hellish, as I expected in a lot of ways. Everything else was quiet. You know, like, it's hard to believe it was like a regular work day in a lot of ways. The way home was busier because I made it home relatively late. Didn't get home until after raid started, which is like 5 p.m. real time now, right? 4 p.m. 5 p.m. my time. And things are already getting dark at that point, you know. Anyway, here we are ready to hit this new turn. French command and rally. I don't expect a hell of a lot to be happening there. I got those French cav up there. Can they do a damn thing? I think they're disordered and withdrew. Yeah. And I don't have any other cav anywhere else. And that's really what happens in the command phase in this one. Not that there's a command phase in Ney versus Wellington, there's just a cav charge phase. And yeah, for rally, might be able to get those guys into somewhat better shape after having fended off the Prussian cav. And then Allied movement. Hands are annoyingly jittery right now. Anyway, I did the French rally. Not that you really need to hear that, but it's the jitteriness of my hands and clumsiness that was what drew me to speak into the camera again. I've got a sweet potato and pepperoni dish that I'm cooking for tomorrow, but and I don't know how it'll go. The only time I've ever had it, my first wife made it a couple of times. I think she actually invented it. Just, you know, thought up, hey, those two flavors go together in a weird sort of way, and it is really good. So I'm hoping it turns out. But in terms of carrying it, because I got to walk, you know, an hour and 15 minutes or whatever to get to where I'm going. I have like one Tupperware thing, and I kind of don't want to bring it, although maybe it's the best choice of all. The other option I would have, I have two other options. One is some plastic containers that, like, you know, for that contain nuts or whatever, and those might work. I think they can be microwaved, but I don't know. And then I think what I'm going to go with is I'm going to go with a coffee can to carry this stuff. I don't know. Right, and the Prussians inching forward into a position. Hey, they might even end up making an attempt at skirmisher versus skirmisher shock attack. Not right now, obviously. It's not going to be their turn. The French don't want to go a one-on-one shock. We will have fire combat, though. So we have artillery here. We have a couple artillery here, keeping them out of the range of the skirmishers at this point. They were out of the range of the infantry, but the skirmishers, well, I think I unlimbered in a stupid place. I could always throw a skirmisher in there to fire, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like a terribly good idea, and my skirmishers couldn't reach at that point. Got some lined up here. The rest of the Prussians are just inching forward. Muffling's made it to his unit. This guy's skirting back this way, hoping he can sneak in from the back way. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to cross the bridge over here, which is really what the problem is. Of course, most of the Allied army is off the board already. I got them positioned here so that I can start picking them off and not paying for them. The French fire routed a skirmisher great. It actually killed one. The Prussian fire blew a hole in the French line, first knocking a skirmisher out, and then a second artillery was able to get a clean shot at a disordered unit that had been routed through, sent that back. Could have been a much, much worse situation. These two had to check. They both succeeded. They needed a 2 to succeed, so could have really, opened the way for an attack. Not that I have anything ready to go in there. These guys are disordered. They're sitting in those buildings that were in the way. So, and I'm trying to flank, but there's cav over here. It's a tight little jam that I'm in. Trying to get the Prussians on the board here. That'll get me to the infantry fire. The infantry fire further degrades the French skirmisher situation. We had one success, but yeah, we might just be able to punch our way through. Move my little tweezers over here because this is where everything's happening. So, counter trays moved, everything. All right, it's time for a break, I think. I gotta stir my food every now and then. 2 in the morning on Thursday, I guess. Thanksgiving. I have tried to snooze a couple of times, and now I have like an hour left, so I'm gonna fuck around and do a little bit of this. Allied Command and Rally, and then French movement. Okay. Oh, this is weird. I've got my dice over here, but I think I just didn't move them from before. I don't think I actually need dice. The battlefield's gotten tiny. It feels a lot more like the Ney versus Wellington Cadabra situation. Trying to attack through kind of woodsy terrain and everything, and just having a hard time filtering everything up. Alright, what's up with the cavalry? So I've got some cav here that is somewhat problematic. Got some, oh, these aren't cav, okay. There's optional rules that you can relay commands, and I think I could have done that here, but those aren't cav, so. Because I would have been able to open things up maybe for a charge. I don't know. I'd have to consider it. But I got Prussian cav there. I got Prussian cav here that's not doing anything. This one could launch a charge. Try to scare these guys out. No. They ain't gonna scare. So I think I'm actually best, since I only have one to defend my line with right now, leaving them not charging. Oh, we're at the end of an hourly turn. No fire because asymmetrical. Sequence of play. Are these all skirmishers? They're not. I'm going to get a leader on that one. Okay. French forces moving forward. Things are getting too clustered here, where I don't feel like piling more troops in will necessarily help. Now, if I could hold this line, see, this faces the wrong way, the sunken part. Over here would be nice, maybe linking the woods or whatever. But if I could hold the line coming down here, that would be okay, but I've got a long ways to go to get there. So I'm settling these down in that location. They're going to deactivate. They're not going to be fully located where they want to be. That's fine. Same thing with Kellerman's Cav. I would rather have them out here. I got this nice line here coming out off of La Belle Alliance. I've got these who were supposed to take the left flank of that sort of third defensive position that the French might fall back to. But honestly, I just don't think, I don't think the French building this kind of defense in depth doesn't do me any good. There's no kind of resting, right? Like, resting just means you don't spend morale. It feels to me like you should be able to get morale back. Because it makes sense to me that if you overtime... So the morale levels have to do with two things. One, they have to do with the general demoralization level of the army, which to some extent resting might not do much for. Now, Summer Storm has this weird concept where if you rest units, you get back all kinds of morale type stuff for it. That actually differentiates, not well, but between army morale and a unit disorganization. And the unit disorganization can be recovered through resting. The army morale in that game can be recovered through having units in reserve, which is a really, really weird thing to do. Because you basically have to spend commands to put units into reserve, and they really are a reserve. Their main function as a command is to allow you to throw more troops into a fight. So having those units in that reserve state, but not in the resting state, improves your army morale. And I've got a lot of weird thoughts about that there, but at least there's this attempt to distinguish between what's just sort of the battlefield fatigue, right, which is really the per unit level, where just rest would do. But honestly, I think rest would actually help recover the army morale state as well. If you've got a small portion of your army fighting, it feels like a large portion of your army not fighting would be able to maybe not recover, so here's the problem. Individual units wouldn't recover battle worthiness, but that's fine. They keep their hits, their cohesion hits, or whatever you want to call them in this. They would keep those. So they'd still be pretty fragile. But yeah, it just feels like there's something a little off about this. In a system that overall I think does a lot of things really well. But it just feels, I don't know, it's always possible to find things to nitpick on, but this particular is really showing up in this scenario because, look, the French have just won a victory. All they got off of it was the 25 points for these two things. I'm not going to spend more points because, well, units back here aren't going to cost me anymore. But they're also not going to recover their own capacity for fighting particularly. Which is to say, these units could break, and that's enough for this. That's enough for the Imperial Guard to say, screw it, we're out of here. You know? It's just, it doesn't feel right. And again, I don't have an immediate suggestion of what would feel right. Obviously, if you're allowing units that are not really battle ready anymore, like some blasted little unit, and I don't know if I have one. I mean, some of these are kind of chewed up, but they're not in that bad a shape. But at some point or another, I would say, hey, a unit no longer, like resting that unit's no longer going to help your army morale, right? I could see an argument for that. That unit is just ineffective, and it isn't really, you know, showing this sort of restraint or whatever. You've got a unit that's too beaten up to really fight. It shouldn't be helping the army morale particularly. But if you've got units that aren't doing anything, It seems like they should be able to recover some of what was lost. Because there's two factors, like I said. There's fatigue, and obviously rest is going to improve the fatigue level of it. But all it does here is prevents you from losing more fatigue for having lots of units moving at once. And then there's also this idea of the Army morale overall. And again, that 25 would be okay if I could get some sort of peace dividend for these units in the back. As it is, I think if this line falls, I might well be out of points, because it's going to be expending its fighting, etc. And all these reserve lines and everything, which feel like I'm doing something that would stiffen the resolve of the army as a whole, just aren't gonna. If this breaks, I think the whole army breaks, right? And for the Prussians, well, you know, I don't know. It's a similar situation. If their front line fails to, you know, if it gets mauled in the attacks, it doesn't have a hell of a lot of points. More than the French do. But anyway, I think we're going to send this up because a lot has happened in terms of the battlefield completely shifting since, I think, the last video. So this is probably a good time to show the very, very different battle that is developing over there now that the Anglo-Allied army has been run off the board, mostly. And they're also going to demobilize. They're going to generate less points because of that, etc.